Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 2 of my Tale of Two Things, continuing work on the John Carpenter thing of MacCready versus the Norris thing. A lot of good work done on the diorama part of the build. I did a lot of the floor and the walls and pretty much completed them as far as the main colors and that sort of thing. Put in some different connectors to put on the Norris body on the table onto the base, as well as the MacCready figure. And also started work and built the basic structure of the flamethrower using some strip LEDs. Now I got the idea for the flamethrower flame from a really cool YouTube channel called Tabletop WitchCRAFT. I will put a link in the description. Really cool videos that he makes. He generally does gaming things, but he does some really cool and realistic looking dioramas. And recently he did one with a wizard shooting a fireball that he made using some strip LEDs and some cotton. And he used some inks of different colors to make the cotton look the right color. So I will be working on that. I won't be getting that completed in this video, but I did start the basic structure of it. And I will also be showing more of that in the next video and going over the techniques that he used and kind of showing that. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so as I showed in the previous stills, I'm at the beginning stages of hashing out my diorama base. So several things come into play when I start at this part of the process, and it really just depends on a lot of different factors as to what considerations I have to take into account when making it. So unlike my other dioramas, this one is not going to have any kind of terrain or raised areas. It's not an outdoor scene. It's a room. So it's going to be a flat floor and then the elements that are going to go inside of it. And I'm going to do some partial walls on it. So I always try to stray away from your standard square or circle or just, you know, some two-dimensional type of thing. Now with this one, it's going to be a little trickier only because, as I said, there isn't any kind of contour or hills or outdoor terrain. It's a room, so it's going to have a flat floor. But I still wanted to make it interesting and make it appealing. And it's also important when setting up the elements that you have and how you want to present them, because that's what the diorama is. It's simply presenting the model or models that you're building and getting the central theme of it out, you know, in a way that's visually pleasing. So I started with just a rectangle at first, and a couple of things went into play as to why I chose that. One of them is that I have these patterns here, which I guess are supposed to be stone, but they look like tile, like a tile floor, and I can dirty it up and paint it and make it look like it's just tile. So I have 4 of these, which are 2 packs, 2 in a pack. And when I put them together, the original rectangle that I ended up with is the size of all 4 of these. And you can see that I cut it down quite a bit. So I wanted it to be irregular, and I wanted to have some partial walls in the back that are going to be, you know, having some doors in them or make up some fake looking wallpaper, that kind of thing. Not fake looking, but you know what I mean. Make up some wallpaper to put on it, and it's going to look dirty and messed up and that sort of thing. So putting the figures in a couple places, I finally came up with the way I want to do it, so I get the maximum view of each of the elements. And this is the final shape I ended on. So what I'm going to end up doing is these smooth parts are going to have walls. Wall here, wall here, wall here. And I'm going to have a door here. It's going to be closed on the wall. I'm thinking of not having a door on that, but having a door on this wall over here. And let me put on the three figures and show you how I want those arranged. All right, so I tried several different configurations as far as how I wanted all three of these to be arranged. At one point I had him over here facing back this way, and I had the spider back behind the table. This is where I ended up with it, and I kind of like the arrangement. Now again, a couple of things come into play here that determine how this has to be set up. One is I definitely want to have a nice view of each of the figures. So MacCready from this angle, the spider head over here, the table of course, and I want you to be able to see the detail there because I'm going to have a wall here and in the back and over there, but it's not going to affect it. And you'll be able to see the back of MacCready because this will be opened over here. You'll be able to see the spider head because this will be open over here. And then I wanted this to be kind of rough because I wanted to look like, yeah, there's a continuation. There's more of a room. We're not seeing the whole room. Plus it cuts down on the size of it, and it kind of just lets you see all the elements that you want. So I think this is where I'm going to end up going, and I might tweak it a little bit as I go. But one of the things that has to happen is that I'm doing a flamethrower effect with MacCready. Get something here. And so what has to happen is the flamethrower, and you can see that's a little bit off, so I'm going to have to move him a bit. And that'll affect the final placement too, of course. So if I line this up straight with the flamethrower, it's got to come down here. I want it to be centered with him. So the flame is going to come down, and it's going to turn into a ball right about in this area. It's not going to be hitting the spider. I want you to be able to see the spider, but it's going to be illuminated by it. So you're going to have the fireball coming down thin here, getting bigger, and then ending in a big fireball, which is going to be right about in this area. So of course I have to watch, like his hand can't be in the way. So I'll have to make sure that that fits. But I got to be careful because you can see this is really close to the edge of the wall, so that's not going to work either. So like I said, there'll have to be some tweaking. Probably have to get over there. Maybe move it like this. Okay, so that'll probably work. And his body will be illuminated by the fire as well, so that's not a problem. And then, like I said, when I have that on there, then so here's going to be the path of the fireball coming from MacCready down to here and lighting up. So you're going to have that over here. So it's going to obscure a little bit of the front of this, but you're going to be able to see the figure on the table still just fine. Obviously MacCready and the spider head. So, okay. So I'm happy with how this is. And then I'm going to take this pre-done tile. And once I make a framework of the walls behind it, I'm going to cut it so that it matches up with the floor. Now, because I have a prominent corner right there, this is all going to be lined up in relation with that corner, so going in this direction. And then obviously cut the rest of it, all of this out, so it just matches up with those lines. And it'll have to be cut on an angle for that too. So really this is the only one that's going to be a squared off part and taking it that way. All right, so I think that's going to be the the final orientation, which is really nice. So let me go ahead and start working on some other aspects of the wood for the walls, and also taking into account the wiring, because the fireball isn't going to be wired through him at all. It's just going to come up and meet this, but it's going to come down, and the wiring is going to go down through a metal tube down through right about here, come out of the base, and I'll just have a groove set up to take it straight back and meet up with the power supply, which is going to be a 9-volt battery. So all right, so I smoothed out the edges along where the partial walls are going to go. And to do that, I just used a cheap dollar sanding sponge that I get at a local dollar store. I like to go with things that are fairly inexpensive, like emery boards and things like this, to do the rough types of things. So this is fine for sanding down this dense foam, getting a nice smooth finish on it, so I can match the walls up with that. So, all right, so now that I've got the shape all hashed out, and I went ahead and I did cut off a little bit more on this end, just because after looking at the figures and everything, it didn't need to be quite that far, since I'm going to move the table up a little bit. So I have it down to the size I want it to be, and I think it's a nice workable size for a diorama. It's a little bigger than my most recent ones. Right now, my Sultan and Mandalorian is my largest one, that and my Thing from Another World. But, well, if you don't count my Discovery up there on the wall. So what I like to do, and what I've done in the previous ones, is because I'm using this dense foam, I like to cut out a piece of wood, either a thin plywood or piece of MDF, and put it on the bottom to give it a little more stability. Foam over time tends to kind of warp, and I don't want that to happen. If I glue on a nice solid piece of wood on the bottom, it's not going to happen. And likewise, I'm going to use the same wood to build up the three-sided back wall on this as well. So what I'm using is I have this poster frame that I got at Hobby Lobby, and you want to kind of get things on sale. Unfortunately, Hobby Lobby got rid of their 40% off coupon, which I don't know why they did that, but they are doing a lot of different sales in different departments, so that kind of makes up for it. All their picture frames, when I went and got this yesterday, are 50% off, so that's even better. So I got this for about $8.50, give or take $8.49. So very nice, and of course you can see it's 18 by 24. So the part that I want, I don't want the frames. All this really is you have a clear covering to go over your poster. You have these four-sided removable frame parts, which you can just pull off, and all they do is clip on. They clip onto it. And these are the same ones that I used and adapted for my pictures behind my Discovery and my Space Clipper. Just use the same basic idea. And they come in several different sizes. This one is the right size for the general shape of my diorama, and I got a larger one as well since they were on sale that I can use. What I really want is the backing is a nice solid, like an MDF or a particle board that's pretty thin. But it's nice and solid. It's easy to cut. I can use my jigsaw on it. It's easy to sand with my Dremel, so I can smooth it out. It works really well, and I've used this before. I just want to pull these off with some pliers, because I'm not going to hang it on the wall, and take the frame and everything off. And I have a nice sized piece of wood. I looked in Lowe's and tried to find something similar. They didn't have anything this thin or this workable, and anything I'd want to get would be in a big 4x8 sheet, so I don't need that much. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take these things off, and then I will measure out what I need for this, trace it out, and I'll cut it out, and then we'll show you how that's going to work. Okay, there we go. So I cut out the wood with the jigsaw. It took me just about 5 minutes. It works really well. Now I deliberately left a bit of an edge around the parts where the walls are going to go, as you can see, because I'm going to use the same material for the walls, and I want that to rest on it and glue against the foam. Give me a nice solid area to support it. I also made sure that I tried to go out a little further out than the actual piece of foam. A few spots I might have missed it a little bit, but I can always carve the foam to match it. So so now I have a piece that that is the same size as the foam board. So what I'll do is first of all, I have to cut out figure out where the wiring for the lighting is going to go. So what I'll do is put the figures back on and figure out, I think it's around in this area here. So underneath it, where you're not going to see it, I'm going to cut out an area and put a channel going straight back to the back. because for this one, just to make it easier, since it's going to have a lot of things on top, it's going to be a little weighty. I don't want to have to lift it up and get batteries underneath. It's only going to have one 9-volt battery lighting up the LED strips for the fire effect. So I'd rather run some wires, and on the bottom I can channel out some of the foam like I did with my Ahsoka Tano, and then in the back of this I'll have a compartment for the 9-volt battery, and it'll just be down inside there. I'll use a remote sensor again like I did in my previous builds to turn the power on, but I want to be able to just, you know, get to the back of it and get the battery out and not be worrying about lifting it up and getting the batteries underneath, which I've done on other dioramas. So okay, so let me work on that. Once I get that hashed out, I'm going to go ahead and get this glued on to the foam. Trying to see, I might either use hot glue, but no, probably not. I'll probably end up using some more of this Aleene's felt and foam tacky glue, which I like a lot. Works really good with foam. It also works with the wood, and it goes down pretty easily and hardens overnight, and I can clamp it down and have it ready to go. So okay. Right, there we go. So I put the figures onto the foam, and I figured out where McCready's going to be standing, and he's going to be firing the flamethrower, and the spider's going to be over here, and just figured out a general place where I'm going to have the wiring coming down through the foam and then going back out to the back, and that's all I need. So when I glue this onto the foam, I'll have access to underneath it to wire it up. I don't have to wire it ahead of time, but I will have an access point in the wood that I'll be able to access there and get to the wiring. And I'll do the same thing in the foam and just put a groove and an opening there where the wiring is going to come down through. So okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and get this glued onto the foam. And then once I get that setting up, I'll be able to look at creating the walls for the back of it. And I'm going to use the same material from another frame that I have as well. So okay. All right, so I'm starting to put together the strip lighting for the fireball effect. The lighting itself is going to be pretty straightforward and simple. I have this LED strip lighting that works on 9 volts. I've had this spool of it for several years actually. I don't use it that often, but this was a big spool. I think it cost me $30 or $40 originally, but just using bits and pieces from time to time, it's obviously gone a long way. And you can cut it off in little sections anywhere where that little separation is there, and just solder the two ends of it. So what I want to do, the idea is that I want to have a ball at the end and then get thinner and thinner up until where it meets the flamethrower. And then to get the effect of the smoke or the fireball, I'm going to just use cotton over top of it. So I wanted to be able to wrap this around something rather than just trying to wrap it around itself. So I took these little beads that I had, half beads. I got these for another project I did, and they're just acrylic plastic. So I just glued them together and made a little ball. It doesn't have to be lit in the center because all the light's going to be around it and glowing from there. So what I want to do is I have my glue gun here, and I'm going to start to glue this onto this little ball and then wrap it around, and then we'll go from there. So okay. All right, there we go. So I have the figures in place on here just so I can measure the distance to make sure that the light will meet up right up to the edge of this, come down, and the ball itself will be around in this area. So as you saw, I glued together the different lights to make the main ball. Then I took it back and I figured out the distance, and then I folded it over. Sorry for the focus. Took it back to here. It went back over the top, and I extended it out a little bit because I wanted to give that more of that kind of a shape right there, like a fireball that's being shot at the spider head. And then this is the only connection that I need to make right here because these are all connected. They're all one piece. So I just need to solder some leads right onto this part right here. And this will be the bottom. So if you're looking at it this way, it will be coming down from the flamethrower, terminating right about here. And then when I bring the leads out of here, I'm going to hot glue a metal tube, which I'll do next with the wiring that'll come out through the bottom, and that'll go down through this hole here to the power supply. So this is the main core of the flame and the fireball. And then of course the rest of the effect I will achieve through cotton and painting. So, okay. All right, so to make this a little more rigid, I took a piece of square brass tubing. As you can see, the end there sticking out. And I made it the length of this. You can see it down inside there. And it's just sandwiched between these lights, as you can see. Now on the end, I couldn't put a hole through it because that would mess up the strip lighting. So I had to bend it. So I bent it out. I bent it back in, as you can see, and then I bent it straight back. So it's fairly close. And then it gives it a nice rigidity. So it's going to hold its shape. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to be nice and solid. And then that ending tip there, I use my Dremel to hollow out the tip of the flamethrower. So what will happen now is once I get it attached down inside, and it's not positioned where it should be, but this will go up inside. Okay, so that'll be cool. And there's lights all the way to almost the tip of it. So when I have cotton around it, it'll even look like a bit of the muzzle flash where the flame is initially coming out. So it might be a little heavier, and I'm going to make it uneven along the length of it. So, okay. So I reinforced a lot of this with some hot glue. I'm going to continue along that and just seal up this gap. The adhesive part of this stripping is not always the best, and I don't want to pull it away. So I'll get that more solidified. And I started working on a thicker brass tube that will go down through the hole that I made. And then that will ultimately glue onto this, and then the wiring will go through it. So it'll be all attached onto that. All right, so looking pretty fantastic. Right, there we go. So I put it in position where I wanted it to be, and it's not attached obviously to the figure, it's just sitting in there. And I put the spider there to position where I wanted it to be as well, so it's pointing directly at it. And then I just have the tube sticking down through the base. The wiring's just coming out through the bottom right now. And then I just put quite a bit of hot glue around it to hold it in place, so that post will be nice and solid onto this whole lighting sub-assembly. So now I can go ahead and take it out, and I can reinforce it some more so it's going to be nice and solid and the wires aren't going to be coming loose. So, all right, let me get ahead and throw a battery on that real quick and just kind of get an idea of what the light's going to look like, and make sure it's working, of course. All right, there we go. And keep in mind right now, you're going to see this the bare lights from it. once I get it covered in cotton and the cotton is painted, it's certainly going to look more like a fireball, and I'm going to make it more uneven. It's not going to be just straight and that type of thing. But there we go, nice and straight. It looks really good, like it really is coming out of the flamethrower. And he can be positioned too, like I said, once he gets permanently put on, he's going to be glued into place. Get up here. Here we go. All right. And it's kind of angled a bit too, so when you're looking at it from the side, you can see a side view of these instead of on top or on the bottom. The other one's angled the other direction, obviously. So, okay. All right, so that mechanism is pretty good. I have it nicely connected onto the copper or brass tube going down through. The wire's coming out right here for now into a battery. I may experiment too and see. I'm not sure if this can handle up to 12 volts. I have some more of this stripping I can test with a 12-volt adapter if I can get a little bit brighter, but I have to wait and see when I get it on the cotton how bright it's going to be. So, okay. All right, and I'm just experimenting with a little bit of cotton. What I'll probably end up doing is painting some of the cotton first before starting to adhere it, but it's going to look really cool. It definitely looks like it's shooting out something that's glowing once it's painted with some clear yellow and a little bit of orange and some red, some black highlights, that kind of thing. So it's certainly going to even the light out. Now I can still see some hot spots. If you look closer with the camera, you can see, but that's going to be pretty cool. Look at that. That's really neat right there, especially when I get it painted. It's going to look pretty cool. So, all right. All right, so as I showed in the previous stills, I glued down the tile onto the floor, and I just used some hot glue to put it down. I kept it at a lower temp. A few of the spots, I kind of just melted it just ever so slightly, which is fine because I want this floor to be all crappy anyway. And the seams are kind of obvious, and again, that's not a big deal. Right now I just have a coating of primer on it, and I'm still trying to figure out what color I want to ultimately make that. I also want to figure out what I want to do with this edge. I'm not quite sure how I want to finish that off. But I cut out some of the wood, the poster board wood, that I'm going to use for the back walls. And I just have it taped up on the back right now. So it looks a little tall, but let's go ahead and put the figures in. I tried to measure based on McCready. These are 12 inches tall. This is an inch thick, so it's about 11 inches taller. So let me put those on and we can try to see where we stand on that. All right, yeah, so if I put his head on, it doesn't stay on by itself unless I glue it, and I'm not ready to. It's a little bit too tall. So I could probably lop off at least an inch, maybe 2 inches, because this doesn't have to be an accurate room. And obviously I'm not going for an accurate room. I'm going to put some doors right here, maybe like a double door. I'm thinking about one door over in that corner, but maybe not. I may not even need it. But I just wanted to kind of give a backdrop to it. So, okay. So let me cut that down a little bit. It's a little too tall. I could probably take off at least about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. So, okay. All right, so I'm getting ready to start doing some weathering onto this floor for the base, and I'll go over that here in just a moment. But before I do that, and you always have to kind of plan ahead when you're doing a diorama to make sure that anything you need to do as far as construction and connecting things, you do it ahead of time, because I wouldn't want to start drilling holes into this after I've put paint on it and weathered it. It just would mess it up. So a couple of things I needed to do, and I did. So this hole already I had for the post to come up for the wiring for the fire effect. I also went ahead and put in 2 brass tubes into the bottom of McCready, glued those in with 5-minute epoxy, and then I drilled some holes where I positioned him where I want him to be. You can see I drew out where his feet are, because he has to be lined up for the fire extinguisher, or the fire flamethrower, to match up with the flame that's coming out of it. So I put some aluminum tubes down into there and glued those in place. So now what I do is just put him into that. Get in there. Okay. Now I don't know if I'm going to permanently glue him down, most likely, just because it's a tricky fit to match this up exactly with the flame effect, and I want to make sure that it works. So, but I have the option of keeping him off of it and just putting him onto the base, you know, when I want to display it. But of course, I wanted to get this done before doing any painting. Now, the table with the Norris body, I do want to glue down permanently. So what I did, let me get this over here. As I showed in the previous stills, I put some styrene tube up into the bottom of these square styrene tubes, and then I glued in some of the big aluminum tubing. Now I just drilled holes into the floor because I don't need to have tubes. I don't have bigger tubes anyway that are going to work. So I just wanted something to give it a more solid connection, because just gluing something onto there, especially a painted surface, isn't going to give it as much of a good connection. So again, I figured out where I wanted it to be. I drew some circles and drilled some holes out, and used my foam tool to go down and melt the foam. So that fits nicely down in there. So when I'm ready to, and everything's all painted, I will put some 5-minute epoxy and glue this in, so this will match up nice and solidly and have a good solid fit. And then I have the hole ready for the fire thing. I don't have any kind of connector for the spider, obviously, because he's not gonna have any way to do that. He'll just be glued down. All right, so I have those all ready to go. So let me go ahead and show you what I'm going to be doing as far as the weathering of the floor. All right, so initially now I just have a coating of Tamiya fine surface primer, light gray, on the surface of this plastic styrene with the design in it. So I thought of a few ideas. I was thinking of maybe coloring some of the towels. That would have been kind of a hassle. I went back and looked at the film and kind of got an idea of the walls and the floor, and everything's just real plain. It's almost like they just took some plywood and boards and just built this base and just slapped some paint on it. And it's obviously really old and the paint's worn. So the floor seems to be a darker color, and it's obviously kind of dirty and messy and missing some spots. So what I'm going to try to do is a technique that is called the Sultan hairspray technique. And I was watching a video from Augie Gonzalez from Starship Modeler recently, where he did the Slave One from Star Wars, the spaceship, and that has a lot of really fine weathering on it. So the basic idea is this: you start with a paint that's not going to come off with water, and this shouldn't because it's a primer. And then you use just some hairspray, and you can either spray it on or you can decant it into a container and dab it in certain spots. Now in this case, I'm just going to spray it on because the whole floor is going to be all this way. I just want to have a lot of different speckled spots throughout it, showing the lighter gray, and I'm going to go over with the darker gray. So what you do is you put down little bits of salt in different spots and kind of spread it out to look like different patchy spots. You spray the hairspray over it and you let that dry. And then once that's totally dry, you go over with the top color you want. In this case, I'll use a dark gray. And then let that completely dry. And then since it's an acrylic paint that I'll be using, you just take a brush and you get some water and you lightly rub where the salt spots are, and it dissolves and the paint comes off, and it just leaves little spots in the paint, and it looks kind of cool. All right, so let me go ahead and give that a try and see how that looks, and then we could do some other weathering as well. All right, and there's the dried hairspray and salt. You can still see the salt. I don't want to touch it too much because it can pull loose, but basically the main idea is that the hairspray holds the salt down, so when you paint over it, it doesn't blow away from the airbrush. And then you can use some water after the paint dries to clear it off. So let me go ahead and put a, I believe I'll do either a dark gray or a German gray. Let me take a look, and then we'll go ahead and put that on there. All right, so I painted the a German gray is what I used, and I painted over it and let it dry for a couple of hours. And I'm going in now with a little bit of water and just I started with my finger. I'm just rubbing it, and it's really cool. It just removes the salt, takes it down to the paint. Anywhere where the salt was, there's no paint, so you see these little spots and marks. Let me try. Well, first of all, let me show you. So say this spot right here. Okay, it just rubs off. I'm just using a paper towel to wipe off the water. Okay, very cool. So what I want to try as well is I have a toothbrush here, and I just use it for this. So let me try that and see if it gives me a little more streaks or obvious kind of wear. Maybe a little bit more. It still only really removes the paint where the salt was. And the rest of it doesn't really come off easily with the water, so. Okay, but very cool. So definitely some worn areas. Actually, I did a little bit more. It took some of the paint out of the little cracks in there, so I can do that in some of the areas, and other areas just use my finger, rub it off. I'll mostly do that. I kind of like how that looks as far as just being kind of random and little specks that would rub off over time with the paint just wearing off. So okay, so I think that's going to look pretty cool. Let me go ahead and I'll do the rest of this, and then I'll show the final result of that. All right, there we go. So I removed all of the salt and even some other areas where the hairspray was a little heavy. It pulled off some of that, which is really cool. I like that. And you can see some of the different patterns that come up in it. So it's still mostly drying, but it looks really cool. It's definitely a worn looking floor. And I can do some more things with that. I may use some weathering powders just to lighten that gray up just a bit. I might even put like a seal over it, a sealing coat first, and then go from there. So, okay, but very cool. My first attempt at at doing the Sultan hairspray. It's really cool, works out good, especially if I want it to be all chewed up, which I did, so that looks really great. And I'll use a similar effect on the walls with a different color, probably some blues. So, okay. All right, and I just put the figures on here just to kind of get a look. So that's going to be pretty cool. And like I said, I'll get this will lighten up a little bit more, and I'll be adding some extra things to it, like a wash and that kind of thing. And I'm definitely going to use some clear water effects to slime up this part here and make like a trail over to the spider, and he's going to be slimed up once I get him painted as well. So, all right. All right, so I'm putting the details on where the doors would be. I'm not making real open doors. That wouldn't make any sense. They don't really need to open. They just need to look like doors. So I took the back piece that's over to the left side, angled, and I used this, this is for plexiglass, for cutting it. It has that really sharp edge right there. So I just scored, I drew off some lines, measured them off. I scored all around where the doors would be, down the center, down the bottom. I might even deepen that one in the middle a little bit just to make it look more like an opening between doors with my Dremel. We'll see. Then I took some thin balsa wood pieces and I just framed around it, cut them on angles at the top. And then I took some thicker balsa wood right here, and I used that for the baseboard on either side. I left this one a little bit short because I'm going to have something up where the two walls meet over on this side. And then I put the smaller piece again across the top. And then I took this thick styrene rod, cut off 6 little pieces, and just glued those 3 on either side to imitate some hinges for the doors. And I'll make up something or get something for the doorknobs as well right here. So. Okay, only other thing I might do, we'll see, is I might cut out some little squares right here in the top, sort of like hospital rooms have, and just put some glass in it and frost it. So it looks like there's something there, so we'll see. All right, and I just used Vibin and epoxy to glue all of this down because it's faster. I could have used some wood glue or Aleene's foam felt glue, but that would have taken hours to dry, where this will be done here in 10 minutes and be ready to start working with. Give it an hour or so and I could even start painting it. So, okay. All right, so instead of cutting out some windows, because again, I don't need anything to really be behind this door, I just took some more of the thick styrene rod that I used for the hinges, cut it out, cut some little angles on them and glued them into place with some CA glue. And I cut out some pieces of plexiglass, which I can put over top of them once I get everything painted. And what I'll end up doing probably is once I get everything painted, I'll just paint some white behind this, probably frost this and just glue it on top. So it looks like a window behind it, but you're not gonna see anything through it. So, okay. So all I need now are some doorknobs to figure out some ideas or maybe make some out of epoxy sculpt. And then I'll be ready to start painting this. All right, so I started painting the walls. I first put down a coat of Tamiya Navy Blue, which is in a spray can, which is a lacquer. And now I'm doing the hairspray and salt technique. Now, you can't use an acrylic as your first coat because it is also water soluble, so you can't be taking the salt off. You're going to take off too much of the paint. So a lacquer is a lacquer or an enamel is a hardier paint. It's not water soluble, so it won't dissolve when you put the water on it. So, okay, so I have these drying, and you can see the sodas on it. I will let that finish drying, and then I'll go ahead and put a coat of a lighter blue, which will be an acrylic, and we'll let that dry, and then we'll go ahead and remove the salt. All right, so there is pretty much my completed basic diorama. I'm going to add a few extra things to it here to put under the walls and that kind of thing. But what I showed in the previous stills is I took some chrome silver, Tamiya, and I painted the hinges on both sides. That was the thick styrene rod. I also painted the same styrene rod around the windows. And I painted white behind it first, just flat white, and then I used some canopy glue to glue in some clear plastic that I had frosted. So it's still shiny on the outside, but it's frosted behind it. You can see a little bit of the canopy glue, but that'll dry up. And even if it doesn't, it looks kind of nasty and disgusting, which is what I like. But it definitely gives the idea that there's two windows here, which you often have like in a medical room or an operating room. I also took two pieces of aluminum tube and I bent them to be handles, and I drilled some holes through the wood and put those in to give it some handles for the doors as well, which definitely makes that flat piece of wood look like it literally has a door. Let me show you real quick. So no door, just a flat piece of wood and some aluminum tubing glued through it. And I just have the whole thing taped right now. I don't have it completely glued together, but it's looking pretty cool and pretty dirty. I also went back and I misted some flat white over all of the pieces to bring down the stark differences, but you can still see the differences, which is pretty cool. Then I went back and I just airbrushed and misted really lightly some flat blue over top of the walls to bring back some of that blue into it that the white kind of got rid of a bit. And I also did some very light gray onto the floor to do that as well. So it's kind of a blending coat. It brings it all together, and it's not too harsh of a colors, but it's definitely very dirty, very worn. The paint's coming off and it looks pretty awesome. So really happy with that. But for now, that wraps it up until I add some extra pieces. One piece I'm going to add is this fire extinguisher, which is just metal. I got this at Hobby Lobby for a dollhouse. Now, it originally had this really obviously fake silver label on it that was too shiny, and it had some words that were way too big. So I peeled that off and I just stuck on some of my silver vinyl that I had just to cover up the glue part that was there. I still want to probably paint like the handles chrome silver. I'll probably end up doing this black on the end of it, maybe paint that black like a hose. We'll see. But I'm thinking of gluing that right about here on the right side of the door, or possibly over here. We'll see. But I'll glue it somewhere. That'll add a little bit of color. I also want to add like maybe a medical poster here with the human body on it. I'm thinking of scratch building a little X-ray, one of those X-ray boxes that has like the clear white on it and some switches. We'll see. Something like that, just to add some extra dimension, and maybe something over here. But other than that, it's pretty much all done as far as the painting. unless I decide to do some extra weathering. And then I still have to figure out what I'm going to do about this edge of the foam, and I'm still not quite certain on that. But okay, but looking fantastic. Let me just do one other look with the figures on it and see how that's going to look. All right, so there we go. So there are the figures positioned where they're going to be, the table. And I showed you earlier about the little holes that I had there for the posts, the brass tubes to go into. So it looks really good. I really like how that looks against that backdrop. And I really like the hairspray and salt technique. I think that's really quite easy to do, and it really adds some believable mottling effect, and looks like paint peeling in different colors and just kind of worn over time kind of thing. And the floor as well, which you'd be hard pressed to try to get that effect if you try just painting it on in some way, or some people use a sponge and some paint and that sort of thing. But that turned out really well, and it was easy to do. So I highly recommend using that that technique. It really made this look dingy and dirty and kind of disgusting. So, all right. So for now, this is where I'm going to leave the base. I'm not going to glue the backs on just yet until I get everything all finished up. Obviously, enough to get the lighting ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and work on, for the next video, getting McCready put together and painted, getting the spider painted, and then certainly working on finishing up the flamethrower effect with the cotton and getting that painted up as well. And then I should be able to wrap up this video on the next installment. All right, so that's going to wrap up part 2 this video for this week. A lot of fantastic progress. I'm really happy with how the diorama is coming out. Next week, I will be able to go ahead and get this wrapped up, or the next video, I should say, where I'll go ahead and get McCready painted and weathered, get the spider painted, and then finish up the fireball effect, and show you how I'll be doing that. So I think that's going to be really cool. Now, I am going to be going to a convention on Saturday, the first in a year. It's going to be the IPMS convention in Indianapolis, in Indiana, where I live. And that's the only convention I was able to go to last year. And I'm very excited to be able to attend one again, and very happy with that. So I will film some video from that, and some pictures, of course, and then do a short video showing that as well. And hopefully bring home a trophy from that as well, like I did last year. Last year I won a first place on my classic Thing from Another World. Now I won't be entering this current Thing build because it's not done yet, and I didn't expect it to be. But I am taking 3 of my other really good models, including my Sokotano with her awesome lightsabers. So I also got a new t-shirt, which is really cool. It's a pixelated image from the movie poster of The Thing. I really like it a lot. It's pretty cool. All right, so thanks to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned. We'll be wrapping up this build very soon here, and I think it's going to be pretty awesome when it's all completed. All right, thanks a lot.